Mohammed Al-Bashir is tasked with forming a new Syrian government to manage the country's transitional phase. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the Syria's future should be determined by Syrian people. And UNRWA says 1 million displaced Palestinians are at risk of death due to the winter cold. It's almost 8 p.m. call local time, and you're now watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Syria. The Israeli occupation army has asserted that its control over the buffer zone in the Golan Heights and Syria's Jabal al-Sheikh is crucial for ensuring Israel's security. According to Chief of Staff Haris Halavi, Israel is now engaged on 4 active fronts driven by recent military operations along the Syrian border and in the Golan Heights. He noted that Israeli forces, including infantry, armored units, engineering teams and artillery, are operating inside Syria, supported by air, naval and intelligence divisions. Egypt has strongly condemned the Israeli seizure of the demilitarized zone along the Syrian border and nearby strategic locations, describing it as an occupation of Syrian land and a blatant violation of Syrian sovereignty. This came in the Egyptian Foreign Ministry statement, where it emphasized that this action contravenes the 1974 disengagement agreement and international law, undermining Syria's territorial integrity. Egypt accuses Israel of exploiting the current instability in Syria to impose new realities on the ground. Egypt urges the United Nations Security Council and international powers to act decisively to ensure Syria's sovereignty over its entire territory. Media reports have said that Mohammed Al-Bashir has been tasked with forming a new Syrian government to manage the country's transitional phase. Russian news agency reported that Syrian factions support establishing a temporary transitional government and wish to operate under the umbrella of a unified administration. The report also indicated that the factions aimed to dissolve all armed groups in the country. Austria, Germany and Greece have suspended asylum applications from Syrian nationals following the end of President Bashar al-Assad's regime. The Austrian Interior Ministry announced that all open asylum cases for Syrians will be halted, with preparations underway for an organized repatriation program to Syria. Meanwhile, Germany's Interior Ministry stated it would not process asylum requests until Syria's political future becomes clearer. Greece revealed that asylum applications from nearly 9,000 Syrians have been also suspended. Additionally, France is reportedly considering a similar suspension within the coming hours. Israeli Foreign Minister has stated that the Israeli forces' limited and temporary presence in Syria's territory, aiming at safeguard Israel. Saad stressed the need to protect Syria's minorities, halt attacks, and highlighted deadlocked negotiations regarding detainees. Israel has sent forces into the demilitarized zone created by a 1974 agreement.
We will follow their steps, and we will follow.
Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has instructed the Israeli army to complete its control over the buffer zone in Syria and key observation points following the occupation of Jabal al-Sheikh and other areas. Katz also called for creating a strategic weapons-free zone beyond the buffer zone in southern Syria, claiming such weapons pose a threat to Israel. He emphasized the ongoing operations to destroy heavy strategic weapons across Syria, including air-to-surface missiles, air defense systems, surface-to-surface missiles, cruise missiles, long-range rockets, and coastal missiles. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi stressed that any Israeli incursion into Syrian territory constitutes a breach of international law. Safadi reaffirmed Jordan's support for a Syrian-led political solution and its commitment to maintaining Syria's stability and security. The Kremlin has announced that Russian President Vladimir Putin has decided to grant asylum to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his family, while the Kremlin noted that Putin has no immediate plans to meet Assad. It described the next phase in Syria as challenging due to its instability. The Kremlin also plans to discuss the future of Russian bases in Syria with the country's new authorities. Iraq's Presidential Council and State Administration Coalition has emphasized the importance of bolstering security along the Iraqi-Syrian border. The meeting highlighted support for government measures to protect border stability, preserve Syria's unity, and respect its sovereignty. The call for a roadmap to define Iraqi-Syrian relations and endorse dialogue aimed at drafting a constitution that guarantees rights for all Syrian factions. The Washington Post has reported that the United States is considering delisting the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham from its terrorist organizations to promote stability in Syria. An American official cited in the report said that the move is under serious evaluation, including HTS's independence from Turkey. The Syrian flag has been raised over the Syrian embassy in Moscow, signaling a new chapter in the country's leadership. Russian media reported that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow with his family after occupation and opposition groups advanced into Damascus. The Kremlin announced plans to hold discussions with Syria's new leadership regarding the nation's future. The Kremlin has stated it is too early to determine the future of Russia's military bases in Syria. That came after Syria's Bashar al-Assad's flight to Russia. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov noted ongoing efforts to ensure security and communication with the parties, and also Russia's air base and Tatros naval facility, vital for Mediterranean operations, remain under scrutiny. US President Joe Biden has announced that the United States will collaborate with partners in Syria to manage risks and seize opportunities. Speaking at the White House, Biden confirmed US support for Syria's neighbors during the transition and stressed that al-Assad should be held accountable. He noted that Syria is in a period of uncertainty.
The Assad regime has fallen.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has expressed support for Syrians seeking a peaceful future. Scholz emphasized the possibility of a national dialogue, orderly transition, and political solution to the conflict. Speaking in Berlin, Scholz stated that Germany, alongside international partners and in line with UN Security Council resolutions, would contribute to this effort.
Und bei den Geflüchteten. Über die letzten Jahre hat das syrische Volk unter Assad entsetzliches Leid erfahren. Deshalb
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on the Syrian people to seize the opportunity for peace after 14 years of war. He emphasized that Syria's future should be determined by Syrians with the support of UN Special Envoy for Syria, Pedersen. Guterres urged a peaceful political transition and respect for human rights, highlighting the need for international support. He also stressed the importance of preserving Syria's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity while honoring those affected by the conflict. Pedersen echoed calls for protecting civilians and institutions.
Unity and respect for international humanitarian law and human rights.
Tensions increase as Israeli actions in Syria's Golan Heights intensify, sparking international criticism and geopolitical concerns.
Tensions have escalated in Syria as Israeli military activities intensify in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights and beyond. Reports reveal Israel advancing through the demilitarized buffer zone, including moving its security fence further into Syrian soil, potentially creating a new buffer zone. These moves are part of Israel's broader operations in Lebanon and Gaza, according to Israeli officials. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump reiterated his administration's recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the occupied Syrian Golan Heights, asserting its importance for Israeli security. This position was criticized by Russia, which argued it violates in principles of territorial integrity under international law. Russia has also criticized Israel's recent airstrikes on Syrian territory as breaches of international law. Additionally, Moscow has raised concerns at the United Nations Security Council, warning of the broader regional instability resulting from Israeli incursions. Reactions from the international community remains mixed. Western nations have expressed cautious optimism about Syria's potential transition, while Russia and Iran have denounced recent developments and pledged continued support for Damascus. Humanitarian organizations have sounded alarms about worsening conditions as the conflict intensifies, urging immediate international intervention. These events highlight the complexity of the Middle Eastern conflict, involving overlapping disputes and broader geopolitical competition, with fears of region escalation if diplomacy fails.
For more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers in our newsroom. Mark?
Thank you, Rana. So for further analysis on the current situation in Syria, we are joined from Cairo by the head of Arab and Regional Studies at the Al-Ahram Center, Dr. Mohammed Ez Al-Arab. Thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. So with Israel crossing the demilitarized zone for the first time since 1973, are the Israeli forces likely to move back anytime soon, or could this mark the start of further incursions?
Israel is trying to exploit the successive events within Syria in order to achieve some of the main objectives. The first one is to acquire more spaces of land that were stipulated in the disengagement agreement in 1974. Therefore, Israel is working on expanding this area within the Syrian territories. And the second objective is neutralizing any threats from the Syrian military forces, not right now, but maybe in the upcoming period, according to the perspective of Israel, as what happened in the 7th of October poses a perspective that is subject for a threat from different parties, affiliated troops from Syria or from Lebanon or from the Gaza Strip or maybe from Yemen. And there is another objective for Israel, which is the full elimination the influence practiced by Syria throughout the historical period, in particular that the Syrian people, along with the Egyptian army, defeated Israel in October's war 1973. Therefore, Israel do not wish a repetitive event, and the fourth objective isn't only linked to Syria, but the Iranian influence within Syria. Israel is trying to completely eradicate the influence supported by Iran, either from the Al-Assad's regime or for Hezbollah.
And do Israel's recent actions impact or contravene even international conventions and norms?
Israel as also is to get herself out from the international agreement, as the official statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemning what Israel is doing as such. But the issue of getting herself out of the international convention or its joint commitment with different parties isn't something new. Israel is always violating the norms of the international law. This is not something new. But as Israel, its goal is not just respecting the law, but the sponsoring the power and force, and it wishes to practice this matter to convene a message regionally or internationally by their capabilities to change the situation in the Middle East. According to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that by either practicing the armed forces or not to abide or withdraw itself with any international or convention or agreement with Syria.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News, Dr. Mohammed Az Al-Arab from the Al-Ahram Center. Thank you very much for joining us, and it's back to you, Rana.
Thank you so much, Mark. And now we move to the latest developments in Gaza. UNRWA has stated that 1 million displaced persons in Gaza are at risk of death due to the winter cold in light of the ongoing war of genocide. This comes as occupation forces continue to target hospitals and medical staff, including strikes on El Auda, El Indonesian and Kamala Adwan hospitals. One Palestinian has been killed and others were injured after the Israeli occupation forces bombed a group of civilians in Palestinian Rafah city. Palestinian media also reported that a number of people were also injured in an occupation raid that targeted a residential apartment in the Nusrayat camp in central Gaza. Israeli occupation forces have detained at least 16 Palestinians from various areas of the West Bank since yesterday evening. Palestinian media reported that the detainees included a woman. This latest wave of detentions brought the total number of Palestinians detained from the West Bank and Jerusalem to over 11,900 since the 7th of October. UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazarani has said that the organization is trying to prevent Gaza's children from becoming a lost generation amid the ongoing humanitarian crisis. Lazzarini called for a ceasefire in Gaza as a crucial step to restoring educational facilities. He also noted that the escalation in Lebanon has affected the education of Palestinian refugees. He added that the escalation in Lebanon has disrupted the school year for Palestinian refugees, affecting education services that the agency has provided for decades. Israeli occupation forces have raided the city of Tubas. Local sources reported that the undercover special forces infiltrated the city and raided a shop on the main street, while soldiers fired smoke bombs in the area. The occupation forces then sent military reinforcements from a checkpoint towards the city. Several Palestinians have been killed and others were injured after Israeli occupation forces bombed the school housing displaced people in Jabalia camp in northern Gaza. Palestinian media also reported that the occupation air force targeted a residential area in the vicinity of Kamal Adwan Hospital. Gaza-based health authorities reported that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October the 7th has risen to over 44,700, with more than 106,100 injured. They added that the Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the past 24 hours, killing at least 50 Palestinians and injuring of 84 others. Moving on to the world of economic and finance, where gold prices rose as China's central bank resumed gold purchases after a 6-month pause, while investors expect an interest rate cut at Federal Reserve meeting next week. Spot gold gained 0.9% to $2,655.81 per ounce. U.S. gold futures added 0.7% to $2,678.20. Moving on to the oil prices, which climbed by more than 1% as top importer China flagged its first move towards a loosened monetary policy since 2010, aiming to bolster economic growth. Brent crude futures were up 1.4% to $72.12 per barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures gained 1.6% to $68.29. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here was what we have been covering. Mohammed Al-Bashir is tasked with forming a new Syrian government to manage the country's transitional phase. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that Syria's future should be determined by Syrian people. And UNRWA says 1 million people displaced Palestinians are at risk of death due to the winter cold. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.